The National Fatherhood Initiative did a study, and they found that when a child is raised in a father-absent home, okay, these are the things, some of the pathologies that are visited upon that child. When a father's not in the home, there's a greater risk of poverty. The child is more likely to have behavioral problems. There's a greater risk of infant mortality, more likely to go to prison, more likely to commit crime, more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, more likely to suffer obesity, and the most scary one of all, more likely to commit suicide. Those are the things that happen when the father's not in the home. And again, part of what's implied by this is a father being engaged in the home, being in the home, being part of the home, being a positive, proactive part of the home.
Hey, howdy, hey, it is Faith Talk Today. I'm Rick Probst. Hope you are having an amazing weekend. Speaking of amazing, we've got a guest we're going to talk to in just seconds. Gary Schneeberger is from Focus on the Family. He's an author, speaker, husband, and father. We're going to talk about fathers. June is Father's Month. And not only is he a father, he's a grandfather and the president of Roar. And he did his time in newspaper about 20 years, and he lived to tell about it. I'm sure that's another interview as well. But first, thank you so much for subscribing to the Faith Talk Today podcast on your favorite platform. You have done it, and we have seen the numbers. Thank you very much. And don't forget, you can listen to our great Atlanta radio stations online at faithtalkatlanta.com. Gary, how are you?
I am doing well. Today is a good day, so thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You have so many things there's so many things that we could talk about with you, and maybe that's for other interviews. I'd love to do that. I watched an interview this morning because, frankly, I didn't know how to pronounce your last name. I threw it around. This morning in the kitchen, I said, how would you pronounce this? And she said, I would say Schneeberger. I said, well, I that's what I would say, but let's see. So I watched an interview this morning just to hear the open of the host pronounce your name. And then I got sucked into the interview, which was a great interview. One of the coolest guys to talk to, we're talking to today, Gary Schneeberger. And he, of course, as I mentioned, a part of Focus on the Family, author. I'll read the Facebook. This is what his Facebook says. Husband, stepdad, heart father, grandfather, PR pro, best-selling author, and Christ follower. Well, it doesn't get any better than that, does it?
Yeah, and it is difficult, even though I've been in the communications business for a pretty long time. It is difficult to compartmentalize your life down into those 5 or 6 phrases, but I managed to do it. So I must not be totally terrible at what I do.
Well, let's talk a little bit about so many things I want to talk about. I'm going to hit you with this, and then we'll get into the meat of the interview. All right, you've done this amazing book, the James Bond legacy. It talks about the world of 007 and all the actors that have played James Bond. Personally, 2 of my favorites, Sean Connery, epic, and Daniel Craig is one of my favorites. I've seen most of all of them, and they did okay. Roger Moore was probably James Bond when I was a teen. Saw Live and Let Die. I thought it was amazing. How about you?
I am interesting, just not to correct you, but so people know if they want to get the book is called From Connery to Craig, the James Bond film series.
Okay.
And the idea behind it there is my co-author and I really wanted to make a case for, and I think we make a compelling case for, those 25 official James Bond films by Eon Productions are, in our estimation, and we unpack it pretty well in the book, a single contained, what we call today, cinematic universe. In other words, from Connery to Craig, there are through lines, narrative through lines, characters that show up. That is one narrative universe, and we argue that whenever they reboot the franchise, which they're going to do soon, we think, it's going to be an entirely new one. So my favorite Bond, Connery, but I also have very high regard for Timothy Dalton, who played him twice in the 80s. I think Timothy Dalton, one of the men we interviewed for the book, was Robert Davi, who played the bad guy in Dalton's second film. He said that Timothy Dalton's portrayal of James Bond made Timothy Dalton the father of Daniel Craig in terms of the seriousness and the lethality that he brought to the character, and I do think that's pretty accurate.
We're talking with Gary Schneeberger. He is part of Focus, an author, the president of Roar, and he's got some great books out there. At another time, we'll pick his brain about those books. I don't know what it is about James Bond, but ever since as a child, just loved them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the male part of me wanting to be a Bond. And you know what? The good thing about my life is not only can I pretend to be Bond, but I definitely am a father. So let's talk about fathers. That was kind of a clunky segue, but
no, I was going to segue it too. I was going to say, Bond, for all of his world traveling and life, and universe saving, Bond at the end of the last run of Daniel Craig in No Time to Die, he becomes a father, and that's everything for him. He truly finds a life of significance by becoming a father. So even James Bond was living a life that wasn't quite as fulfilling as he wanted it to be until he became a dad.
See, that was a much prettier segue. I got to tell you, Gary, it was just there. So I think you're right, and great films there. All of those films. Let's talk about fathers. We're 21st century fathers. We've seen the picture of the father change in the media on sitcoms over the years. It's come a long way since the Andy Griffith Show. And what about fathers? Let's talk about how important fathers are. I'm a father. You're a father. How important are we, Gary?
Yeah, the National Fatherhood Initiative did a study, and they found that when a child is raised in a father-absent home, okay, these are the things, some of the pathologies that are visited upon that child. When a father's not in the home, there's a greater risk of poverty. There's the child is more likely to have behavioral problems. There's a greater risk of infant mortality, more likely to go to prison, more likely to commit crime, more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, more likely to suffer obesity, and the most scary one of all, more likely to commit suicide. Those are the things that happen when the father's not in the home. And again, part of what's implied by this is a father being engaged in the home, being in the home, being part of the home, being a positive, proactive part of the home. There's a lot of suffering that can go on in the lives of children. And our president, Jim Daly, knows that, having been abandoned by his father when he was young, and ended up in orphan care when he was still in single digits. So it's amazing. It's amazing to me that Focus on the Family, which is dedicated to helping families thrive, is run and has been for more than 20 years by a man whose own father was not part of his growing up. That is a remarkable story, and if I may add, a God story for sure.
Gary, you used the word engaged, and I love that we can be fathers. And frankly, I have been at times in our lives as a father, just focused on, trying to get the bread on the table and trying to get things going, that I've missed precious moments that now, as I look back at 63 and my boys now are all men, I'm like, a little bit of guilt there. So it's really important for us to not only show up at night and, I guess we don't read the paper anymore. I was sad to say, and get the puppy to get the slippers, but we need to be engaged with our children. How can we better do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways. Focus on the Family does indeed one of we call them the legs of the chair. One of the four major areas of what Focus does is parenting. And we are just now in the next few days, we're going to have open at focusonthefamily.com a dad's portal, which really focuses on ministry opportunities for dads, resources you can use. And here's the best one, Rick. The best one of those things I think that's new. There's a dad jokes section. So you dads who part of your engagement is dad jokes, we're going to have some offerings of dad jokes for you. You can even probably submit them to us. If it's not officially there, info@focusonthefamily.com. Send your send your dad jokes into us, and we'll see if we can get them in that portal.
I love that. I've been telling dad jokes now for 35 years. My 35-year-old actually, he says it's laughingly, it's a curse. He tells dad jokes, which he's not a dad yet. He just uses my old one. I think they're beautiful. We're talking with Gary Schneeberger, and he's a part of Focus. He's also an author, a husband, father, grandfather, and president of Roar. And there are a couple of things I know we have to go here in just a few. Gary, your favorite Father's Day celebration. What do you like to do on Father's Day?
Oh, that's a great question. I think just as we talked about earlier, being present, being with the family, having those conversations. I know when I was growing up, I loved asking my dad questions about how he grew up. What was it like? What was your neighborhood like? Who were your buddies when you were a kid? Because those buddies were long gone by the time the fifth of 5 kids, 14 years between the oldest and me, the youngest. My dad didn't have a lot of chance to talk about those things. But I would encourage everyone here who's not a dad, who is a child of a dad, whose dad is still around. Call your father up on Father's Day. Spend some time with him. I think that's what dads really want to do.
Yes,
is spend time. And I can tell you this from 3 years ago. My dad died 3 years ago. He was 93 years old. Lived a great, robust life, but it's still hard to walk through a Walmart and see cards for Father's Day because I have no one to give it to. You don't want that to be your story. So engage. Your father being engaged will help you grow. Will help kids grow. Some of those, all of those pathologies I talked about at the beginning are gone when a father is in the home. But if the father's going to be engaged, if your dad's going to be engaged, folks, engage your dad because he wants to have that conversation with you. We're old enough here that we can talk about this part, but you don't want to live Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. You don't want that to be your life story.
Yeah. So well said, Gary, and we are so sorry for your loss. We are blessed. My dad lives with us, has his own apartment in the bottom part of the home, built just for him. He's 88 years old. And, hey, they're like every other, I guess, male. There's been, over the years, teenage years, just times when you didn't want to talk to your dad. Then later on you did. And I've learned more about my dad since my mother passed 6 years ago. I've learned more about my dad in the last 6 years than I have in the last 60 some years. And it's just, I love the stories. I love hearing his heart. I wish I would have asked him sooner. So yeah, right. I'm going to confirm that. Ask your dad. Ask him about his growing up, the good times, the bad times, the funny times. It's just good stuff. Gary Schneeberger, just a cornucopia of stuff going on in this guy's life, and we got to get him back on the show. He's a part of Focus, and he's an author, speaker, husband, grandfather, and a president of Roar. We'll have to ask you about Roar next time, too, what Roar is and what you guys do. Pick up his books, check out the interviews, friend him on Facebook. I did that this morning. Hopefully he accepts my friendship. We'll see.
I will go do it right after we're done. I'll go do it.
Love it. Gary Schneeberger. Hopefully we'll get him back, and we want to pick his brain about more stuff. What a great guest. Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening to the show. Thank you for subscribing to the Faith Talk Today podcast. We've seen it. The numbers are amazing. Must be because of my amazing producer, Ezra. But anyway, thank you very much. And don't forget, you can listen to our Atlanta radio stations online at faithtalkatlanta.com and on the mobile app. Well, next weekend, we're going to have another great show. Hope you have a great week ahead. Until next weekend, I'm Rick Probst. See ya.